Admiral Kate Sullivan stood in the command center of the Redemption, watching the tactical displays show the target system. Tau Ceti had once been home to a peaceful species called the Malari, who built beautiful crystal cities that sang in the wind. Now it was a Vex harvesting operation where the aliens processed the remains of conquered worlds and turned them into raw materials for their war machine. The strike force consisted of 12 ships crewed entirely by reborn warriors. Each ship was a masterpiece of hybrid technology that combined human ingenuity with adapted Vex systems. They could move through space almost silently, and their weapons could actually penetrate Vex defenses. Most importantly, their crews had abilities that no enemy had ever faced before. Jake Morrison commanded the assault ship Vengeance alongside Kate's flagship. His crew of 20 reborn could accomplish missions that would have required hundreds of normal humans. They moved with perfect coordination and seemed to anticipate each other's actions before they were taken. The enhancement process had not just made them stronger, it had made them into something like a collective organism. Commander. Ben Parker piloted the Silent Thunder through the outer edge of the Tau Ceti system, using stealth systems that made his ship nearly invisible. His enhanced senses could feel the gravitational currents around the planets and detect Vex patrol ships from millions of miles away. He had become one with his vessel in a way that normal pilots could never achieve. The Vex had turned Tau Ceti into a factory of death. Massive processing ships stripped minerals from dead planets. Harvester vessels broke down the molecular structure of organic matter and fed it into growing pools where new Vex bioships were being created. The entire system pulsed with alien technology that had been fed on the remains of a dozen conquered civilizations. Kate studied the tactical data that her scout ships had gathered over months of careful observation. The Vex had 47 ships in the system, including 3 massive harvester vessels and a command ship that coordinated the entire operation. Under normal circumstances, it would have taken a fleet of hundreds of human ships to have any chance against such a force. But these were not normal circumstances, and the reborn were not normal humans. Kate had planned this attack for 2 years, and every detail had been calculated to maximize their advantages while minimizing Vex strengths. They would strike fast and hard using tactics that their enemies had never seen before. The attack began at the edge of the system, where Ben Parker's Silent Thunder emerged from stealth directly behind a Vex patrol ship. The hybrid weapons tore through the alien vessel's defenses like they were made of paper. The Vex ship tried to send a warning, but Ben's crew had already jammed their communications using technology that the aliens did not know humans possessed. Jake Morrison led the main assault against the harvester ships orbiting the dead world that had once been the Malari homeworld. His reborn crew moved through the ship with inhuman speed and precision. They could see electromagnetic fields and sense the flow of energy through Vex systems. This let them target weak points that normal humans would never have found. The Vengeance unleashed a barrage of hybrid weapons that struck the largest harvester ship at exactly the points where its bio-armor was weakest. The alien vessel shuddered as explosions tore through its living hull. For the first time since Earth fell, a Vex ship was taking serious damage from human weapons. But the real shock came when the Vex tried to adapt their defenses to counter the human attack. Normally, their bioships could modify their armor and weapons in real time to deal with new threats. But the hybrid technology that Ryan Brooks had developed was partially based on Vex systems themselves. When the aliens tried to adapt, they found themselves fighting against their own technology. Kate coordinated the fleet's movements from the Bridge of the Redemption, using enhanced tactical abilities that let her process information faster than any normal human could think. She could see the entire battle in her mind like a 3-dimensional chess game. Every move the Vex made was anticipated and countered before they could complete it. The reborn crews fought with a ferocity and skill that would have been impossible for normal humans. They could survive in environments that would kill ordinary people. They could interface directly with their ship's systems and control multiple weapons at once. Most importantly, they fought with a coordination that seemed almost telepathic. Dr. Elena Rodriguez monitored the battle from her laboratory. Hidden deep in an asteroid belt, she watched the biological readings from the reborn crews and marveled at what they had become. Their heart rates stayed calm, even in the middle of intense combat. Their brain activity showed patterns that she had never seen in normal humans. They were becoming something new and magnificent. The Vex command ship tried to rally the remaining vessels for a counterattack, but it was already too late. Half of their fleet was destroyed or disabled, and the humans were moving too fast to be caught. The aliens had never faced an enemy that could match their technological advantages while also being unpredictable and creative. Commander Ben Parker led a strike team aboard one of the damaged harvester ships to gather intelligence about Vex operations. His enhanced crew could survive in the toxic atmosphere inside the alien vessel and interface directly with Vex biological computers. What they found was both horrifying and valuable. The Vex had been harvesting more than just raw materials from conquered worlds. They had been collecting genetic samples from every species they destroyed and incorporating the best traits into their own biology. The database in the harvester ship contained information about hundreds of extinct civilizations, including detailed records of their strengths and weaknesses. But the most important discovery was that the Vex collective consciousness was not as unified as it appeared. There were factions within the alien hierarchy that disagreed about tactics and priorities. Some wanted to focus on expansion, while others preferred to consolidate their existing territory. This division could potentially be exploited by future human operations. The battle lasted only 6 hours, but when it was over, the Vex harvesting operation in Tau Ceti was completely destroyed. 12 human ships had eliminated a force of nearly 50 alien vessels without losing a single crew member. The debris from destroyed Vex ships drifted through the system like a monument to human vengeance. News of the victory spread through the hidden human bases faster than light travel should have allowed. The Reborn had developed communication methods that used quantum entanglement and other exotic physics that normal science barely understood. For the first time in 75 years, humanity had won a major battle against their enemies. But the victory had consequences that went far beyond the Tau Ceti system. The Vex collective consciousness reeled from the shock of encountering an enemy they thought was extinct. Across the galaxy, Vex commanders began receiving new orders to hunt down and destroy any remaining human survivors. The aliens realized that their greatest threat was still alive. The battle also sent ripples through the populations of conquered species throughout the galaxy. Survivors who had given up hope began to whisper that the legendary humans had returned. Resistance movements that had been dormant for decades started planning new operations. The galaxy was remembering that the Vex could be defeated. Kate Sullivan knew that one victory was not enough to win a war against such overwhelming odds. The Vex still had thousands of ships and controlled most of the known galaxy. But the Battle of Tau Ceti had proven that the Reborn could fight their enemies on equal terms. Now they needed allies, and they needed to inspire others to join their cause. The Drakmari were a proud warrior species that had fought the Vex longer than any other race before finally being conquered. Small groups of Drakmari survivors had been hiding in the Outer Rim territories, nursing their hatred and planning revenge. When they heard about human victories, they sent secret envoys to make contact with these ghost warriors. The synthetic beings known as the Guardians had been created by an ancient civilization to protect important knowledge. They had been fighting a guerrilla war against the Vex for centuries using hit-and-run tactics. Their computational abilities could analyze Vex weaknesses and develop new strategies for fighting the collective consciousness. Even some species that appeared to be completely absorbed by the Vex began showing signs of resistance. The collective consciousness that the aliens used to control conquered populations was not perfect. Individual minds could sometimes break free and remember who they used to be before they were assimilated. Jake Morrison met with representatives from these various resistance groups in secret locations throughout the Outer Rim. He found that many species had capabilities that could complement human abilities. The Drakmari were natural warriors with incredible physical strength. The Guardians could process tactical information faster than any biological mind. Other species had their own unique advantages. But Jake also learned that the Vex were preparing their response to the human resurgence. They were dispatching their most powerful war fleets to hunt down the remaining human bases. The largest of these fleets was led by a massive bioship called the Harvester Prime that had incorporated the genetic material and memories of 1,000 conquered species. The hidden asteroid bases became places where the impossible happened every day. Dr. Elena Rodriguez walked through the enhancement laboratory, watching as another group of volunteers prepared for the transformation that would make them into something more than human. The process had been refined over the years, but it was still dangerous and painful. Elena had learned to read the faces of the volunteers. Some were scared but determined. Others were angry and wanted revenge against the Vex for what they had taken away. A few were simply curious about what they might become. All of them knew they might not survive the process, but they volunteered anyway because staying human meant staying weak. The enhancement chambers looked like metal coffins filled with strange fluids and wires. The volunteers would lie down inside. Them and Elena would start the machines that would rewrite their genetic code and install cybernetic implants throughout their bodies. The process took 3 days, and the volunteers screamed for most of it even though they were unconscious. Jake Morrison had been one of the first to undergo the transformation, and now he helped Elena with the newer volunteers. His body had changed, in ways that were obvious and ways that were not. He was taller and stronger than before. His eyes had a golden color that seemed to glow in dim light. His reflexes were so fast that normal humans could barely see him move when he wanted to be quick. But the changes went deeper than just physical improvements. Jake could feel things that normal humans could not sense. He could tell when Vex technology was nearby, even when it was powered down and hidden. He could predict how enemies would move in battle like he was reading their minds. Most strange. Of all, he sometimes dreamed about things that had not happened yet. The new generation of Reborn were even more advanced than Jake's group. Elena had learned from her early mistakes, and the enhancement process was producing humans with abilities that surprised everyone. Some could interface directly with computer systems just by touching them. Others could see electromagnetic fields with their naked eyes. A few seemed to be developing limited telepathic abilities. Commander Ben Parker was one of the most successful examples of the enhancement program. Before the transformation, he had been a good pilot, but nothing special. After emerging from the enhancement chamber, he could fly ships in ways that seemed to break the laws of physics. He could feel the gravitational fields around planets and stars. He could navigate through asteroid fields at speeds that should have gotten him killed. Ben was chosen to command the first ship built with Ryan Brooks' hybrid technology. The Silent Thunder was not large, but it was unlike anything humanity had ever constructed before. Its hull was made from a combination of human engineering and grown Vex materials. Its weapons used energy systems copied from captured alien technology. Most importantly, it could become almost invisible to Vex sensors. Ryan Brooks had spent decades figuring out how to make human and Vex technology work together. The process was like trying to teach a computer to dream or making a living creature think like a machine. Human technology was based on logic and engineering principles. Vex technology was organic and adaptable and seemed to have moods. The breakthrough had come when Ryan realized that Vex technology was not really technology at all. It was biology that looked like machines. The Vex grew their ships and weapons, the same way that humans grew hair and fingernails. Once Ryan understood this, he could start to work with Vex systems instead of trying to force them to behave like human machines. The hybrid weapons that Ryan created were terrifying and beautiful. At the same time, they looked like living things made of metal and crystal. They could adapt to different targets and learn from each battle. Most importantly, they could actually damage Vex ships, which human weapons had never been able to do effectively. The training programs for the Reborn were unlike anything in human military history. The enhanced humans learned to fight in ways that took advantage of their new abilities. They could move through zero gravity like they were swimming through water. They could survive in vacuum for short periods without life support. They could coordinate their attacks with a precision that seemed almost supernatural. Jake Morrison developed new tactics that were specifically designed for fighting the Vex. Normal human military doctrine was based on using superior numbers and firepower to overwhelm enemies, but the Vex always had more ships and better weapons, so those tactics would never work against them. Instead, Jake taught the Reborn to fight like predators. They would strike fast and hard at weak points in Vex formations. They would use stealth and misdirection to confuse their enemies. Most importantly, they would never try to fight fair because fair fights were something that only the strong could afford. The Reborn learned to work together in small teams that could accomplish missions that would have required entire fleets. in the old days. Their enhanced senses let them communicate without using radios that enemies could detect. Their improved reflexes let them coordinate attacks with split-second timing. Their new instincts helped them find weaknesses in Vex defenses that normal humans would have missed. Elena Rodriguez made another breakthrough when she discovered that the enhancement process was continuing to change the reborn even after they left the laboratory. Their bodies were still adapting and improving months or even years after the initial transformation. Some were developing new abilities that Elena had not programmed into them. This discovery led to the development of second and third generation enhancement procedures. Each new generation of reborn was more capable than the last. They were becoming something that was clearly no longer human, but they were still recognizably descended from humanity. Elena began to think of them as humanity's children, rather than just enhanced humans. The hidden bases expanded as more survivors were found and brought in for enhancement. What had started as a few dozen desperate people hiding in the dark had grown into a civilization of thousands of reborn living in secret cities carved out of asteroids and dead planets. They had their own culture and their own way of looking at the universe. The reborn children were the most remarkable of all. They were born with abilities that their parents had gained through painful enhancement procedures. They could interface with technology almost from birth. They seemed to understand mathematics and science intuitively. Most amazingly, they appeared to be developing a form of collective consciousness that let them share thoughts and emotions with each other. Dr. Elena Rodriguez realized that she had not just created enhanced humans. She had started the evolution of an entirely new species. The reborn were becoming something that could not only fight the Vex, but potentially surpass them. They had human creativity and adaptability combined with capabilities that went far beyond what normal biology could achieve. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, the Vex had continued their expansion and conquest. They had absorbed dozens of new species since destroying humanity. Each conquest made them stronger and more adaptable. They had become the dominant force in the galaxy, and no one could stand against them. But the Vex collective consciousness had a blind spot that they did not know about. They believed that humanity was extinct, and they had stopped looking for human survivors. They had no idea that something new and dangerous was being forged in the hidden places between the stars. They did not know that their greatest enemy was preparing to emerge from the shadows. The time for hiding was almost over. The reborn had ships that could fight Vex vessels on equal terms. They had weapons that could actually hurt their enemies. Most importantly, they had abilities and tactics that the Vex had never encountered before. Soon it would be time to remind the galaxy that humanity was not dead. Kate Sullivan stood on the bridge of her new flagship, the Redemption, and looked out at the secret fleet that had gathered in the Kepler void. Hundreds of ships, crewed by thousands of reborn warriors, were ready to begin the war that would decide the fate of the galaxy. They had been hiding and preparing for 75 years, and now they were ready to show the universe what humanity had become. The Vex thought they had won when they destroyed Earth, but they had only made humanity stronger. Soon they would learn what it meant to face an enemy that grew more dangerous with every defeat. 50 years passed in the cold darkness of space, and the scattered humans learned how to live like ghosts. Lieutenant Commander Kate Sullivan woke up from her long sleep in the cryo chamber, feeling old and tired even though her body had not aged much. Around her, the other survivors were waking up too from their frozen dreams. Kate's group had been hiding in the Kepler void for decades. It was a region of empty space where nothing lived and nothing grew. Perfect for people who needed to stay invisible. Over the years, other human ships had found their way to the same hiding place. Now there were dozens of vessels floating in the darkness like a secret fleet. The ships were not the shiny new vessels that humanity had once built. These were patched and repaired things held together with spare parts and desperation. The people living in them had changed too. They were harder now and more careful. They had learned that making noise or showing lights could mean death. Kate walked through the corridors of her ship, the Silent Hope, and looked at the faces of her crew. There were engineers and soldiers and scientists and ordinary people who had lost everything. Some had been children when Earth died, and now they were adults who had never seen a real planet. They all looked to Kate for answers she did not have. Chief Engineer Ryan Brooks had spent the 50 years of hiding doing something that might have been impossible. He was trying to understand how Vex technology worked by studying the pieces of wreckage that brave scavenger crews brought back from old battlefields. Ryan had always been good with machines, but Vex technology was like nothing humans had ever seen. The Vex ships were not just built, they were grown. Their hulls were made of living metal that could heal itself when damaged. Their weapons used energy in ways that human science could not explain. Their computers were not computers at all, but pieces of living brain tissue from conquered species all connected together. Ryan had been working in a hidden workshop built inside an asteroid for 30 years. The workshop was filled with strange alien parts and half-finished experiments. Most of his attempts to copy Vex technology ended in explosions or worse. But slowly, very slowly, he was starting to understand how their enemies thought and built. Dr. Elena Rodriguez had been a young geneticist when the war began. Now she was the closest thing humanity had to an expert on alien biology. She had studied tissue samples from dozens of different species that the Vex had conquered. What she found painted a picture that was both terrifying and hopeful. Elena worked in a secret laboratory hidden in the rings of a gas giant, where the radiation would hide her experiments from any sensors. She had discovered that the Vex were not originally one species. They were a collection of thousands of different alien races all merged together into one collective mind. Each conquered species added new abilities to the Vex, but Elena had also found something else. The Vex collective mind was not perfect. It was good at copying and improving existing traits, but it was terrible at creating completely new things. The Vex had never faced a species like humanity before. Humans were unpredictable and creative in ways that did not fit into the Vex pattern of thinking. Kate Sullivan decided it was time to bring the scattered survivors together. She sent secret messages to every human group she could find. The messages were hidden in old emergency codes that only humans would recognize. Slowly, carefully, the hidden fleets began to gather in the Kepler void. The first council meeting in 50 years was held aboard Kate's ship. Representatives from dozens of survivor groups came together in the ship's cargo bay. There were military officers who had been fighting guerrilla wars against Vex patrols. There were scientists who had been studying alien technology in secret. There were ordinary people who had spent decades just trying to stay alive. Jake Morrison was there too. The years had made him older and scarred, but his eyes still burned with the same fire that had kept him alive when the horizon's edge was destroyed. He had been leading hit-and-run attacks against Vex supply convoys with a small fleet of modified ships. His crews called him the Ghost Captain because he could strike at the Vex and disappear before they knew what hit them. The council argued for days about what to do next. Some people wanted to keep hiding and hoped the Vex would eventually leave human space alone. Others wanted to try to find other species in the galaxy who might be willing to fight alongside humanity. A few even suggested trying to make peace with the Vex. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood up during one of these arguments and made a proposal that shocked everyone. She suggested that humanity should stop trying to go back to what it used to be. Instead, they should become something new. Something designed specifically to fight the Vex and win. Elena explained her plan to use genetic engineering and cybernetic implants to create enhanced humans. These new humans would be stronger and faster and smarter than normal people. They would have better reflexes and improved healing abilities. Most importantly, they would have mental defenses against the Vex collective consciousness. The plan was dangerous, and there was no guarantee it would work. The genetic modifications could kill the volunteers or drive them insane. The cybernetic implants were based on captured Vex technology that was not fully understood. But Elena argued that normal humans had already proven they could not fight. The Vex and Win Ryan Brooks supported Elena's plan because he had been working on something similar. He had been trying to create hybrid technology that combined human engineering with Vex systems. His experiments had produced weapons and ship components that were more effective against Vex defenses than anything humanity had built before. The vote was close, but the council decided to try Elena's plan. They would create a new kind of human being. Someone who could fight the Vex on equal terms and maybe even win. The survivors began calling this new generation the Reborn because they would be humanity rising from the ashes of defeat. The first volunteers for the enhancement program were soldiers like Jake Morrison, who had been fighting the Vex for decades. They knew the risks, but they also knew that hiding in the dark forever was not really living. Elena's laboratory became a place where normal humans went in and something new came out. The early experiments were painful and dangerous. Some volunteers died during the process. Others survived but suffered from side effects that Elena had not predicted. But slowly the procedures improved, and the first successful reborn emerged from the enhancement chambers. They looked mostly human, but they were clearly something more. Their reflexes were impossibly fast. Their strength was beyond anything a normal person could achieve. They could see and hear things that others missed. Most importantly, they seemed to have an instinct for fighting that let them predict what their enemies would do. The reborn were tested in secret battles against captured Vex drones and automated systems. The results were better than anyone had dared to hope. For the first time since Earth fell, humans were winning fights against Vex technology. It was not enough to win the war yet, but it was a beginning. As the years passed, more humans volunteered for the enhancement program. The hidden bases became training grounds where the reborn learned to use their new abilities. They practiced with hybrid weapons that Ryan Brooks had created. They learned to work together in ways that took advantage of their enhanced senses and reflexes. Kate Sullivan was one of the last to undergo the enhancement process. She was older than most volunteers, and the risks were higher. But she survived and emerged as one of the most capable of the reborn. Her tactical skills combined with her enhanced abilities made her a natural leader for the new generation of humanity. By the end of the hidden years, humanity had changed completely. They were no longer the same species that had built cities on Earth and dreamed of exploring the stars. They were something harder and more dangerous. They were the reborn, and they were almost ready to remind the galaxy that humanity was still alive. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the horizon's edge, watching the stars through the main screen when everything changed forever. His ship was 3 days out from the colony world of New Haven, when the sensors started screaming warnings. That made no sense. Something massive was moving through space toward them, but it was not showing up on any of their detection systems properly. Jake had been exploring space for 15 years, and he had never seen anything like this. The readings showed energy signatures that were off every chart they had. His science officer, Lisa Carter, ran her hands over the control panels trying to make sense of what they were seeing. She was one of the smartest people Jake knew, and she looked confused, then something was very wrong. The first ship appeared out of nowhere like it had been invisible until that moment. It was huge and black and shaped like nothing humans had ever built. It had curves and spikes that seemed to move even when the ship was still. Jake ordered his crew to try talking to it, but there was no answer. The alien ship just hung there, in space like it was studying them. Then more ships appeared, dozens of them, then hundreds. They came from every direction and filled the space around the horizon's edge like a dark cloud. Jake had seen big fleets before, but nothing like this. These ships were not just big, they were alive somehow. He could see parts of them moving and changing as he watched. Lisa was shouting numbers at him that made his blood run cold. The enemy fleet was massive beyond anything they had ever imagined. There were thousands of ships, and they were all heading toward human space. Jake tried to send a warning message back to Earth, but something was blocking all their communications. The aliens had cut them off from the rest of humanity. The attack began without warning. Beams of red light shot out from the alien ships and cut through the horizon's edge like it was made of paper. Jake felt the ship shaking apart around him as his crew screamed and tried to fight back. Their weapons did nothing to the alien ships. The energy beams just bounced off their hulls like raindrops. Jake managed to get most of his crew to the escape pods before the ship exploded. As his pod drifted away from the wreckage, he watched the alien fleet move past them toward human space. He knew that Earth and all the colonies were about to face something they could not stop. The aliens were too strong and too many. The invasion of human space was fast and terrible. The aliens called themselves the Vex Collective, and they moved through the colonies like death itself. Jake's escape pod was picked up by a human patrol ship, but by then the news was already spreading. New Haven was gone. The mining stations, at Alpha Centauri were burning. The research colonies in the outer systems had gone silent. Dr. Alex Bennett was working at the Luna Station research facility when the Vex reached Earth's solar system. He was studying alien life forms that human explorers had found on distant worlds when the attack began. Alex watched through the station windows as huge black ships appeared around Earth like a swarm of angry insects. The Earth Defense Fleet tried to fight, but it was hopeless. Alex saw human ships exploding one after another as the Vex weapons tore them apart. The orbital defense platforms that protected Earth lasted less than an hour before they were destroyed. Then the Vex began bombing the planet itself. Alex was one of the few scientists who managed to escape Luna Station before it was destroyed. He got on a transport ship with other refugees and watched Earth burning below them. The great cities were turning into craters of fire and smoke. Billions of people were dying, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. Admiral Lisa Carter had been promoted fast during the crisis, and now she was in command of what was left of the human fleet. She had maybe 50 ships against thousands of Vex vessels. Lisa knew they could not win a straight fight, so she made the hardest decision of her life. She ordered all human ships to scatter and hide. The plan was simple but desperate. Every ship would go in a different direction and find somewhere to hide in the vast emptiness of space. They would shut down their engines and go silent. Maybe some of them would survive long enough to figure out how to fight back. It was not much of a plan, but it was the only one they had. Jake Morrison found himself commanding a small group of survivor ships that included families and children from the destroyed colonies. They had almost no weapons and very little food. Jake led them to a dead star system far from any trade routes where they could hide among the asteroids and try to stay alive. Dr. Alex Bennett managed to study some Vex technology that was left behind after battles. What he found made him sick with fear. The Vex did not just want to conquer human worlds. They wanted to harvest human beings like crops. They took the best parts of every species they conquered and added those parts to themselves. They had been doing this for thousands of years across the galaxy. Alex realized that humanity was supposed to be the Vex's next meal. They had studied humans from far away and decided that human creativity and adaptability would make good additions to their collective mind. But the human fleet scattering into hiding had ruined their plans. The Vex could not harvest what they could not find. Over the next few months, the last human ships went into hiding across the galaxy. Some hid in asteroid fields. Others found empty planets where they could dig underground bases. A few brave crews even hid their ships inside gas giant atmospheres where sensors could not find them. They all went silent and waited. Earth became a dead world. The Vex had taken what they wanted and left the planet as a burned wasteland. The great cities were ruins. The oceans were poisoned. The billions of people who had lived there were gone. It looked like humanity had been wiped out completely. But in the dark spaces between the stars, small groups of humans were still alive. They slept in frozen chambers to save resources. They ate recycled food and breathed recycled air. They fixed their broken ships with spare parts and hope. Most importantly, they remembered what had been lost and promised themselves that someday they would make the Vex pay for what they had done. The galaxy thought humanity was extinct, but it was wrong. Humanity was just sleeping and dreaming of revenge.
Admiral Kate Sullivan made the decision that would change the fate of the galaxy while standing in the ruins of what had once been New York City. The radioactive wasteland that Earth had become stretched out around her like a monument to everything
humanity had lost. But Kate was not here to mourn the past. She was here to announce the future. The broadcast equipment had been secretly installed in the remains of the old United Nations building. It was fitting that humanity's declaration of war against the Vex would come from the place where Earth's nations had once tried to work together for peace. Now there would be no peace until either humanity or the Vex Collective was completely destroyed. Jake Morrison stood beside Kate as she prepared to speak to the entire galaxy. The years of fighting had changed him even more than the enhancement process. His eyes held depths that seemed to contain the memories of everyone who had died when Earth fell. He had become something that was barely human, but he still remembered what it meant to care about other people. The broadcast began with images of Earth as it had been before the Vex came. Green continents and blue oceans, cities full of light and life. Billions of people living and working and dreaming about the future. Then the images changed to show what the Vex had done. The burned continents and poisoned seas. The empty cities where nothing lived except radiation and regret. Kate's voice carried across every communication network in the galaxy as she delivered humanity's message to the universe. She spoke in simple words that every species could understand. She told them that the humans were not dead. She told them that the time for hiding was over. Most importantly, she told them that the Vex could be defeated if everyone worked together. The response was immediate and overwhelming. On worlds throughout the galaxy, species that had been conquered decades ago began to remember what freedom felt like. Resistance movements that had been silent for years started broadcasting their own messages of defiance. The Vex Collective consciousness found itself facing rebellions on 1,000 different worlds at the same time. The Drakmari warriors emerged from their hiding places in the Outer Rim territories and began attacking Vex supply lines. Their natural strength and fighting skills combined with human tactical advice made them incredibly effective guerrilla fighters. They painted human symbols on their weapons and armor to show that they were part of the new alliance. The synthetic Guardians activated sleeper programs they had hidden in computer networks across the galaxy. These programs began disrupting Vex communications and feeding false information to their command structures. The aliens found their own technology turning against them as the Guardians used their computational abilities to spread chaos through Vex systems. Even species that had been completely absorbed by the Vex Collective began breaking free from mental control. The enhancement process that Dr. Elena Rodriguez had developed for humans included techniques for resisting collective consciousness. These techniques were shared with other species and helped them remember their individual identities. But the Vex response was swift and terrible. The Harvester Prime led a massive fleet toward the Sol system with orders to destroy Earth completely and end the human threat once and for all. The bioship was larger than a moon and contained the collective memories and abilities of every species the Vex had ever conquered. The entity commanding the Harvester Prime was something beyond normal understanding. It had the tactical genius of the greatest military minds from 100 different species. It could think in ways that no single biological consciousness could match. It had been created specifically to deal with threats that normal Vex forces could not handle. Kate Sullivan watched the enemy fleet approaching Earth through sensors that could detect ships from light years away. The Vex had brought everything they had to this final battle. There were thousands of bioships of every size and configuration. Some were as large as space stations. Others were small and fast like deadly insects. All of them were focused on one goal, which was wiping humanity out of existence. But Earth was no longer the defenseless world that the Vex had burned 75 years ago. The Reborn had spent decades turning their home planet into a fortress that could fight back against any enemy. The continents were covered with weapon installations that used hybrid human and Vex technology. The poisoned oceans had been turned into massive cooling systems for energy weapons that could crack planets. Dr. Elena Rodriguez revealed her final creation as the enemy fleet entered the outer edges of the solar system. She had developed a new generation of humans who could interface directly with the Vex collective consciousness. These transcended beings could enter the alien group mind and turn the Vex's own adaptive abilities against them. The transcended looked barely human at all. Their bodies were filled with cybernetic implants that let them survive in environments that would kill normal people. Their minds had been modified to think in ways that could match the complexity of the Vex collective. Most importantly, they had been given the ability to spread chaos and individuality through group consciousness networks. The final battle began when the Vex fleet reached Earth's orbital defense grid. The planet was surrounded by weapon platforms and shield generators that had been built from the wreckage of the original invasion fleet. Human engineers had studied Vex technology for decades and learned how to turn it into tools for defending their home. The space around Earth became a storm of energy beams and exploding ships as the two fleets engaged each other. Vex bioships tried to adapt their defenses to human weapons, only to find that the hybrid technology kept changing faster than they could adjust. Human ships used tactics that confused the collective consciousness because they were based on individual creativity, rather than group thinking. Jake Morrison led a strike force of transcended humans in a desperate assault on the Harvester Prime itself. Their modified ships could survive inside the bioship's living hull, and their enhanced abilities let them navigate through alien corridors that changed configuration every few minutes. The assault team had one mission, which was to reach the central consciousness and corrupt it from within. The interior of the Harvester Prime was like a nightmare version of a living organism. The walls pulsed with alien heartbeats. The air was filled with spores that tried to convert any organic matter they touched into Vex biomass. Streams of data flowed through neural networks that connected the minds of 1,000 conquered species. Then, transcended humans moved through this environment like they had been born to it. Their cybernetic implants protected them from biological attacks while their enhanced minds could interface directly with Vex neural networks. They began spreading packets of chaotic information that introduced concepts like individual identity and creative thinking into the collective consciousness. Admiral Kate Sullivan commanded the defense of Earth from the Bridge of the Redemption as Vex forces broke through the outer defense lines and began bombing the planet's surface. She watched cities that had been rebuilt from the ashes of the first invasion being destroyed again. But this time, humanity was fighting back with everything they had learned during 75 years of war. The battle reached its climax when Jake Morrison and his team reached the central consciousness of the Harvester Prime. The entity they found there was beyond anything they had imagined. It was a fusion of the greatest minds from dozens of species all working together with perfect coordination. It spoke to them in the voices of every race it had absorbed. But the transcended humans had something that the collective consciousness could not understand or predict. They had individual creativity and the ability to think in ways that broke the patterns of group consciousness. They began introducing random variables and chaotic elements into the Vex command structure. The effect was immediate and catastrophic for the Vex. Their perfect coordination began breaking down as individual minds within the collective started asserting their own identities. Ship commanders began making decisions based on personal initiative rather than group directives. The unified fleet started fragmenting into smaller groups that sometimes fought each other instead of the humans. Kate Sullivan made the ultimate sacrifice when a Vex superweapon threatened to destroy Earth's population centers. She piloted the Redemption directly into the path of the energy beam and used her ship's hybrid power core to create an explosion that neutralized the threat. Her last transmission was a message telling all humanity that the future belonged to them. Dr. Elena Rodriguez watched from her laboratory as the Vex collective consciousness began fragmenting across the galaxy. The chaos that the Transcended had introduced into their group mind was spreading through quantum communication networks faster than the aliens could contain it. Entire sectors of Vex space were breaking free from central control. The war ended, not with a single decisive battle, but with the slow dissolution of the Vex collective, as individual species within it began remembering who they used to be. Some fragments of the Vex fled to dark space where they could try to rebuild their group consciousness. Others sought redemption and tried to make peace with the species they had conquered.